Welcome back to Vibe Vision, where we take a closer look at some of the most interesting and iconic cars that have left a mark in automotive history. Today we're diving into a car that not only defined a new era for Volkswagen, but also brought practicality and style together in a way that appealed to enthusiasts and everyday drivers alike. This is the 1980 Volkswagen Scirocco. The 1980 Scirocco was Volkswagen's way of moving forward from the Beatles' legacy and making its mark in the sporty compact segment. Designed by the legendary Giorgetto Giugiaro, it shared its platform with the Golf but brought something very different to the table. While the Golf was practical and boxy, the Scirocco was sleek, low-slung, and designed to look fast even when standing still. By 1980, the model had already gained popularity in Europe and abroad, and it was competing directly with sporty coupes from Japan and other European brands. Let's start with the exterior, because that's where the Scirocco really made its first impression. The design is sharp, angular, and distinctly late 70s transitioning into the 80s. At the front, you had a clean and minimalist fascia, with rectangular headlights that aligned seamlessly with a narrow grille. The grille itself carried the VW emblem proudly, sitting between the lights, keeping things symmetrical and tidy. The bumper was slim, unlike the heavier chrome bumpers of the previous decade, and in many markets you'd see it finished in black to add to the modern, performance-oriented look. The hood had subtle creases that gave the front end some character, without being over-designed. Moving to the side profile, the Scirocco showcased one of its most defining features, the sharply sloping roofline that carried all the way back into the hatch. This created a fastback coupe silhouette that stood out against boxy competitors of the era. The proportions were perfect for a sporty compact. Short overhangs, a relatively long wheelbase, and just enough ground clearance to give it a low, planted stance. The side windows were narrow and framed by thin pillars, adding to the aerodynamic impression. The lines along the body were simple but crisp, running straight from the front to the rear and giving the car a sense of motion. Depending on the trim, you'd often find alloy wheels or steel wheels with signature VW hubcaps, both of which suited the car well. The wheel arches weren't exaggerated, but they framed the tires neatly, emphasizing a clean, no-nonsense design language. At the rear, the Scirocco carried forward that sharp and functional style. The hatchback design made it practical, while the taillights were rectangular, stretching horizontally and integrating smoothly into the rear panel. A black bumper finished off the back end, mirroring the front, and the rear window was steeply angled, with a wiper that gave it a sporty yet practical edge. Overall, the 1980 Scirocco's exterior perfectly balanced sleek Italian-inspired styling with German simplicity. It was a car that looked like it belonged on winding roads, and even standing in a parking lot, it commanded attention. Now let's talk about performance, because while the Scirocco looked the part, it also had the engineering to back it up. Under the hood, the 1980 Scirocco offered a range of inline-4 engines, depending on the market and trim level. In the United States, the most common options were the 1.6-liter and 1.7-liter four-cylinder engines. These engines weren't huge by displacement, but they were lightweight, reliable, and rev-happy. Output ranged from around 70 horsepower in the base versions to about 76 horsepower in the 1.7-liter. In Europe, performance-oriented versions like the Scirocco GTI and GLI could be equipped with fuel-injected 1.6-liter engines producing closer to 110 horsepower, which gave the car a real punch for its class. Paired with either a 4-speed manual or, in some cases, a 5-speed manual transmission, the Scirocco rewarded drivers who liked to stay engaged. The gear ratios were short, keeping the car lively, and while it wasn't blisteringly fast in a straight line, it made up for it with agility and responsiveness. The lightweight body, tipping the scales at just over 2,000 pounds, meant it didn't need massive horsepower to deliver fun. Handling was one of the Scirocco's strongest traits. Thanks to its front-wheel drive setup, independent front suspension with McPherson struts, and a well-tuned rear torsion beam, it was stable yet playful. The steering was precise, offering good feedback, and the low stance gave drivers confidence when pushing through corners. Compared to its rivals, the Scirocco stood out as a driver's car, not because it was the fastest, but because it felt balanced and connected to the road. The braking system, with disc brakes up front and drums in the rear, was adequate for the car's weight and performance. Enthusiasts of the time often praised the Scirocco for how accessible its performance was. You didn't need to be a race driver to have fun behind the wheel. It was approachable, forgiving, and versatile enough for daily driving and weekend canyon runs alike. When it came to ride quality, Volkswagen struck a good balance. It was firmer than a Golf, leaning into its sporty intentions, but it wasn't punishing. On highways, it cruised comfortably, while on twisty roads, it came alive. Fuel efficiency was also a big selling point. Even when driven spiritedly, the Scirocco could deliver respectable miles per gallon, making it appealing to younger buyers and commuters who wanted something sporty without breaking the bank on fuel. Shifting our focus inside, the 1980 Scirocco continued to impress with its blend of practicality and sporty character. The interior was driver-focused, with a simple but functional dashboard. Volkswagen's design philosophy at the time was all about clarity, so you had large, easy-to-read gauges directly in front of the driver. Speedometer, tachometer, fuel, and temperature gauges were all neatly arranged, and depending on the trim, you might even get additional instrumentation like a clock or oil pressure. The steering wheel was slim and purposeful, giving the driver a clear view of the instruments. The center console was straightforward, with simple slider controls for ventilation and a slot for the factory radio. What stood out most inside the Scirocco was how much space it offered for a coupe of its size. Thanks to the hatchback layout, the rear seats could fold down, opening up a surprisingly generous cargo area. This practicality was one of the key reasons people gravitated toward the Scirocco over traditional two-door coupes. The front seats were supportive, designed with bolstering that held occupants in place during spirited driving. Upholstery ranged from durable cloth to sportier materials depending on the trim level. While the rear seats were tighter, especially for adults on long trips, they were still usable, which made the Scirocco more versatile than many of its competitors. Noise levels inside the cabin were relatively low for the era, though you'd definitely hear the engine when you pushed it hard. But that was part of the charm. The car felt alive, and drivers who enjoyed the mechanical connection appreciated that feedback. The 1980 Volkswagen Scirocco was more than just a stylish compact coupe. It was a statement from Volkswagen that they could build something sporty, practical, and affordable all at once. It captured the imagination of drivers who wanted something beyond basic transportation, offering European flair, engaging performance, and daily usability in one package. Even today, the Scirocco from this era stands as a reminder that driving pleasure doesn't always come from brute force or high horsepower, but from balance, design, and the way a car makes you feel on the road. Thanks for watching Vibe Vision. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1980 Volkswagen Scirocco, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more classic car reviews.